you've said about your work, and to some readers, I think each of your novels, they're very different. But you've said that each of your novels linked by the fact they're a quest.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a little bit more about Naming the Bones and how it started?
Yeah, I think books, again, you're never quite sure where it comes from. And I think this is a book that I've been carrying around, or the themes I've been carrying around with me for years. I guess the recurring thing is the text. There's often some kind of text in my books, as there was in that short story, which I kind of realised that I've done it again, rather than thinking, I must put the text in. This novel, Murray Watson, who is a doctor of English literature and should be doing very well, actually. He's a first generation to go into further education. He's got this great job at the University of Glasgow. Everything should be good for him. He's about to start in a sabbatical where he's studying the works of a poet, Archie Lunan. Is a poet that I made up. No poetry was harmed in the making of this book. You'll be very pleased to hear that I wrote no poetry. Murray's life outside is falling apart a little bit. He manages to estrange himself from his family, his lover, who is also the wife of his professor. I don't know if there's any academics here, but I've noticed with academics, they're very focused people, they work very hard, but like the rest of us, they want love. Often they're working so hard, they can only find love 2 or 3 doors down the corridor. And this is what Murray has done. He's found love with his professor's wife, who perhaps isn't as engaged in it as he is, and he also manages to fall out with his friends. So all one by one, his kind of supports are taken from him, and he becomes increasingly absorbed in his quest to find out more about this poet who left behind one slim volume of verse. I think that the interesting thing for me about academics is that level of focus that you need in order to be a good academic, this interest in something that other people may not be so interested in. And it was something that I enjoyed very much about the bookshop. I think as a kind of collectors have this as well, this level of focus. And often everybody else was fed up listening to them, but I would be really keen to hear what they had to say about their thing that they were fascinated with. So that's partly what drives Murray, and all those other filters that usually tell you how to behave, and when things are getting a little bit too serious and you should step back, they've been removed, and so Murray goes a bit further than he should.
Are you going to read us a little bit?
I'm going to read you a tiny 3-minute bit. The other recurring theme in my books is, of course, the pub. Lots of research have gone into this bit. This is Murray's, as I say, Murray's lady love has dumped him, and Murray has done what many people have done before under these circumstances. Sometimes it's the only thing you can do. He's gone to the pub, and he's there with his pal Rab. Fowler's had quenched thirsts for at least 100 years. Its high ceiling was iced with intricate cornicing, its windows frosted with etchings advertising whiskies and beers which let light filter into the bar but allowed privacy from passers-by to priests, poets, skivers, fathers on an errand, or men seeing about dogs, idle students and lovers budgeting towards leaving their spouses. Mrs. Noon kept things tight, and it was rare to wait too long to be served or to see a fight that got beyond the third punch. Fowler's should have been a nice place for a drink, but it was a dump, a prime-time contender for a brewery theme pub revamp. There were no ashtrays on the table, but the ceiling retained its nicotine hue, and the smell of unwashed old men, stale beer, and the cheap bleach used to sluice down the toilets was no longer masked by cigarette smoke. The bar stools which harboured men who remembered the city when it was all soot and horse shit were as scuffed and unsteady on their pins as their occupants. The orange and blue carpet, once loud enough to drown out the Saturday night crowd, had sunk to sludge. Murray tipped back his 5th pint of the evening and decided this was where he belonged. 2 thoughts were pinballing around Murray's brain. The first was his need for another drink, the magic one that would make everything click into place. The second was that he'd drunk too much and should get home before he shipwrecked himself. Maybe it was the bell that made him think of shipwrecks. It was loud and clanging and spoke to him of treacherous rocks and shattered hulks. What was it like to drown? Pushing the boat out tonight. That's what they were doing, setting out into perilous waters, and none of them in possession of their sea legs. Murray raised his head. Mrs. Noon was holding a tin tray loaded with empty tumblers, their rims edged with tides of dead froth. He wasn't sure he'd ever seen the woman out from behind the bar before. "I didn't know you had legs, Mrs. Noon. I thought you were a mermaid." Great singers, mermaids. They lure poor sailors to their deaths just for the fun of it. Beautiful creatures, beautiful and cruel. "Ah, you wouldn't want to hear me sing." The manageress placed his half-full glass in amongst the empties on her tray. Now that really would be a cruelty. She watched Rab neck the dregs of his pint, then took his glass from him. "Time to head home, gentlemen." She was right. They should have left hours ago. Now here he was, drunk and sober at the same time, each half of him disgusted at the other. Someone had propped the doors open. The crowd was thinning, people sinking the last of their drinks, reaching for their jackets, all the heat and chatter drifting out into the night. He stretched an arm towards his beer, but Mrs. Noon sailed the tray up and away beyond his reach. What happened to drinking up time? It came out too loud. He caught the barman throwing Mrs. Noon a look and the woman's answering shake of the head. "You heard the bell. That's drinking up time over. Do you want to get me into trouble?" He was a lecturer in English literature at a distinguished and ancient university. He straightened himself in his chair and summoned forth the spirit of Oscar Wilde. "Don't you think you may be a little old for me to get you into trouble, Mrs. Noon?" "No need for that now." Rab was pulling on his jacket. "You'll have to excuse my colleague. He's been the recipient of bad news." Murray lumbered to his feet. The battle was lost. There was no more drink to be had, no possibility of reaching the required state here. The landlady disregarded Rab's apologies and turned her practiced smile on Murray, ice and glass. She'd once told him she had a daughter at the uni. She said, "I was just thinking the same thing of the pair of yous. You're both a little old to be getting into trouble. Go home, gentlemen." But of course, they don't go home. Thank you.